Welcome to the Deeptech Nation Forum, the platform for interviews with key people of the Swiss technology ecosystem. Listen in and get to know their personal stories, experience and vision for the Switzerland of tomorrow.
Welcome to the Deeptech Forum. Pascal König is with us today. I'm absolutely delighted to have you here, Pascal. Hello.
Thanks very much for having me.
I'm Dominique Mégret from Swisscom Ventures, and we know each other. You've been my chairman on a couple of boards, Ava Woman and Skylight. So I know you for a few years, but I'm still very interested today to ask you a few pointed questions on yourself. You know, who are you as a person? What has been your entrepreneurial experience? And we also would like to understand your vision for the future. So let's get started with you, Pascal. Who are you?
Yeah, I mean, I ask myself that question as well, but I think a few things. I'm a very informal person. I'm looking for impact, and I think that is really what makes me so much happier in very informal, small structures in the startup world compared to working in a big corporate that has much more processes and guidelines and red tape. So I think that's definitely one driver. I'm a people person, very much so. I think this is what makes me wake up, get up in the morning. Currently my family, my two kids that I spend a lot of time with, obviously my friends, my co-workers, but I think that makes a huge difference to me, to work with people that inspire me and that makes it fun at the end to do projects.
That sounds very soft, but actually you started with a real career in, let's say, you know, Mckinsey, Synthes, and big firms, big corporations. So you have that side as well. So when you started, what was that? You know, the 20 years old, top grads from St. Gallen. Why did you go to Mckinsey, for example?
No, I mean, it's true. I'm definitely ambitious. I'm very curious, intellectually curious. I really want to understand things. So it's true. I mean, it's not just the soft aspects. I definitely have that as well. But I think what really drives me at the end is probably more the soft factors at the end than the hard factors.
Right, I understand that. So you've been first in consulting, then you went into medtech. What did you learn from those years in large corporations?
No, I had a very steep learning curve, both at Mckinsey, where I worked with some super bright people on very intellectually stimulating projects. Still have a lot of friends there, and I learned a lot. And the same is true for Synthes, which is one of the cases, Stratec, that you actually describe in your book, and which is definitely very interesting. Now part of Johnson & Johnson, of course. So I think it's important to understand kind of how the corporates drive, also from a startup perspective, because if you don't understand that, I think you have trouble to scale.
Mm-hmm. And when did you decide to jump ship, so to say, and to go on the other side and start your own business?
Yeah, it's I still remember that very well. About 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago, a person called Gregor Zünd, who is now a professor at the University Hospital of Zurich and the head actually of the University Hospital of Zurich, he called me and he told me that they have the issue that after open heart surgery, people are very well monitored during the operation, but also in the ICU thereafter. But then from the ICU, you move into the general ward and into rehabilitation and back home, and all you have is basically a red button above your bed. So from 21st century high-tech medicine to the 19th century, if you want. Yeah. And he said, let's make that journey after open heart surgery much more intelligent. And for me, it was, when he told me this story, it was very clear that I want to be part of that.
So what did you do? concretely?
Well, I was the first employee at that company, and it was super interesting. We learned a lot.
So which company was that?
It was a company called CardioSafe.
Right.
And what we did is we attached a wearable device that measured in the earlobe SpO2, so the oxygen saturation in the blood, and the heart rate.
Right.
So two of the basic physiological parameters continuously. And we used Nokia phones, you probably remember the times, Bluetooth connections and a back end for continuous monitoring and real-time alarming. A lot of the cardiologists, they were very euphoric about it, and they said, this is the future of cardiology and it will go into that. Having said that, the system was still quite complicated, reimbursement was unclear, and timing was not right. So that's almost 20 years ago. So we did generate some revenues, but we couldn't really reach this hockey curve. That was the first company that I was co-involved with.
Good try. Does it work now? I mean, other companies did eventually implement that?
Absolutely, and it's interesting to see that now some of the success cases in the last few years, they do exactly that concept. But timing is crucial. That's one of the key learnings I did as an entrepreneur, that you can be too early with certain technologies that scale only later.
So what would you advise to an entrepreneur who's too early? Do you stick to your idea forever, 20 years, at the risk of never to make it, or should just jump on another opportunity and let timing be managed by other people? So how can you manage time, basically?
I strongly believe in this whole lean movement. I must say, I think it makes a lot of sense to be very pragmatic, very fast, and pivot. I think there are probably a few exceptions, and I think it makes a lot of sense that we also invest into basic research, mostly via ETH and EPFL. So I think that's very important to do big bets on the future of stuff that will develop only over decades. But I think from a startup perspective, it's very important to not
try fast, stop fast,
and
move on.
Right.
Okay. And actually, you are coming back to your first startup with your current ventures. Actually, it's never too late to start again. You tell us, but in between you had another one, Limmex.
Yeah.
Can you give us more insight? What is it? How did you start it? And what happened?
Yeah. No, the basic problem was that a lot of elderly persons, they wanted to live by themselves. Didn't want to go to an elderly home. Many of them, especially women, living by themselves. And there have been systems that increase the safety of these persons, because you can fall down, you can have another medical issue, so that's quite frequent at old age. But these systems provided by the Red Cross, for instance, were kind of red buttons. And if you press that, you would do a connection via the fixed line and talk to an emergency center. There have been three problems. First of all, a lot of elderly persons, they don't want to be stigmatized. So they don't want to be around with a red button and kind of indicating to the world that they're not doing so well. Second, it needed a technician to come to the people's home and place it right and connect it. And third, many of these people are still mobile and go out for shopping, for walking their dogs, and this system only works at home. So we did basically a new version of that. We took an analog Swiss watch. We have a big heritage in Switzerland, obviously. We worked with Sonova, so Andy Ries was the key investors to miniaturize and build mobile phone technology into a normally looking watch. Right. So we had 10 different watch models that you could choose from that looked like normal watches with integrated mobile phone, microphone, speaker, and very simple. You just press a button if you have a problem, and then there is a a cloud-based escalation process. So you could first call your son, and if he doesn't answer, you call your daughter, your neighbor, and if nobody calls, maybe a professional emergency center.
Right, great idea. Mm-hmm. So it worked, so you commercialized it, I think through Swisscom as well.
Exactly.
In our shops, I think I've seen them.
Yeah. We had a very good cooperation with Swisscom. We were becoming market leader in Switzerland in terms of revenues quite quickly, so that was working well. But I think in hindsight, we didn't think big enough. I mean, that's one of the factors that you describe very well in the book, that if you compare Silicon Valley startups, where if you have a proof of concept, you would invest 50 million and really make it big and push it. And I think that's exactly what we should have done 7-8 years ago. Right.
We'll come back to this, because the main question is what should we do next and how can we do it better? And I think the third startup we should mention is Ava Woman, which you started when 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, 6-7 years ago, and I think the learnings from the other, well, Limmex is still up and running, so but some of the learnings definitely came into Ava, and above all that we entered the US market first and didn't start with.
What is Ava? Can you describe what it is?
Yeah, so basically the issue is that a lot of couples are struggling to conceive. I know this situation quite well. So every third couple, it does not work out immediately, and every sixth or seventh couple will go to reproduction medicine after a certain period of time, where it gets very emotional and expensive. And obviously, it's crucial to know when you can get pregnant as a woman. There are just a few days during the menstrual cycle where you can get pregnant. But the trouble is that so far it's not been easy to actually in real time know when these days are. So there is, of course, temperature method and calendar method and urine tests, but all of them have downsides. So what we did is jointly with the University Hospital of Zurich and ETH and other partners develop a wearable device. CSCM was a key player actually in Neuchâtel. Develop a wearable device, so it's a bracelet that is only worn at night by our customers, records 3 million data points every night, and based on the big data, we can accurately and in real time detect this fertile phase. Right. So that was the initial product, and we are now working on making this available also for digital contraception, for pregnancy, making pregnancy safer, and other aspects of women's health.
So that has been a radically different approach to Limmex, because you started with the US, as you said, so worldwide launch. You raised quite a lot of capital from venture capitalists, and so can you describe that process versus the, let's say, the Swiss old way? You've made both, so I think it's interesting to get your perspective on that.
I think every Swiss knows that the US market is massive, right? So I think that is well known. But then again, I mean, you would argue that Europe is actually, in terms of population and even GDP, is similar in size. But I think what is just in terms of tech scaling really interesting is that the US is much, much easier to scale something fast because it's very homogeneous, people like technology, and people are willing to spend on new products. So I think scaling a product in the US is much, much easier than it is in Europe. And we still feel that now. I mean, you can buy Ava in all European countries, but the key market still by far is the US.
Is the US, yes. Very interesting. So now we're getting to the core topic of the connected Uhr, so the connected watch. You know, I'm a bit worried, frankly, because when I see what's happening with the iWatch, Samsung, now they're really getting huge market share. It's becoming a bigger market than the total Swiss industry. So I'm asking you, since you are an expert in that space, are we losing the game And if yes, what should we do to regain what would be natural market share of the Swiss industry into this connected world? So that would seems to be a natural extension of the current watch industry. Sorry, watch industry with Swatch, especially given the fact that Switzerland is very strong on the medical side as well. So that would be a natural fit. Why isn't it working?
No, it's a very good point, and I've had many discussions and a lot of thoughts around that. And I'm not so afraid about Rolex and Breguet and Patek. I think there will be also in the future a market for very high-end products. But I do believe that we have missed and are missing, hopefully it's not too late, a huge opportunity in that. And it's exactly what you say. I mean, we have in Switzerland, we have world-class pharmaceutical and medtech companies, and we have some of the best watch companies, obviously. And it's really a shame that we are not the leader in that, and that the Apple Watches and the Fitbits and the Samsungs and actually various Chinese companies that are doing a great job are taking over in that space.
So why? Why do you think it happened this way?
Well, I think there are several factors. But one factor I would say is timing, actually. If you look at Swatch, and Swatch would be actually the very natural player for that, with 20 brands from Breguet to the Swatches, so the whole range they have. And obviously there is space within the watch conglomerate for smart products. And the Hayeks, and especially Nick Hayek, the current CEO, I think they have tried some things already 20 years ago. They did a project jointly with Microsoft that is not so well known now, but they have been among the first movers, but lost a lot of money 20 years ago, and basically learned the hard way probably that, you know, this doesn't work, right?
It's not easy.
And now, 20 years later, where actually things have started to work out like crazy, they are very late to the game. And I think some projects start again. There is some interesting developments, but there is a lot more to do.
So what should we do concretely?
Well, I mean, I think
I'm saying investors like us, we'd be happy to contribute to this. And I guess the pharma industry is interested as well, because you can get lots of data from these devices. The medtech as well, because they are used to produce a component for these type of connected watches. So everybody should be interested. So why aren't we able to federate forces and make it happen?
Yeah.
Are we missing an entrepreneur who would be taking the risk and everybody would follow? I mean, what are we missing exactly?
Yeah, I think it's probably what you say. I think in terms of the Swatch Group, it's not the money. They have enough cash on their balance sheet. So I think it's not that. It's really more that there's a big reluctance to really engage in this new sector. So I do think what you say, like a strong person and some flagship projects are important. I mean, Beaver is doing certain things with Tag Heuer that are interesting in that space, but I think a lot more is required. And now I think it doesn't necessarily have to be the big groups. I mean, very often innovation comes from startup companies, but it takes a lot of money to really become a key player in that. And that's why I think what you propose to invest 50 billion, I think, over the next decade into deep tech, I think is crucial to really catch up and take the lead in a sector where Switzerland is really a no-brainer company to be strong.
Mm-hmm. And where else would you invest this 15 billion?
Well, obviously, I mean, I know this digitalization of healthcare very well, so I'm very euphoric about what is possible there in different aspects. It's not been digitalized so far, much less than many others, and I think this will have huge impact over the next decades. And I think it will not just be simple. I mean, there is data protection, there is many challenges that we have, so it's not going to be an easy journey, but there is huge potential in that. Then I think, I mean, what you described in the book are many areas that are very close to my heart, like environmental sustainability, like smart cities, and various other fields where I feel that Switzerland has very good cards to be successful.
To be more specific on the health side, what kind of technologies do you think are particularly promising, especially in a Swiss context? If you had to name 3 areas, where do you think Switzerland can be a category leader?
Yeah, I think it will be a combination of different things coming together. I think on one hand, really understanding on a cell level what is happening with DNA, understanding and sequencing the DNA, to generating huge data sets, to continuous monitoring of physiological parameters, I think will have a huge impact on the healthcare systems. So, and I think it takes biotech, pharma, medtech companies and also big data, AI, to come together and create many things. I mean, looking back, I think we saw in oncology and cardiology, for instance, huge advances over the last few decades. Currently, a lot of stuff happening in areas like diabetes or sleep medicine. And I think there is a lot to come in stuff like understanding neurology, for instance, Alzheimer's, Parkinson, depression, many other things where we are just at the very, very beginning, and there will be exciting developments. And I think in all of that, Switzerland has a role to play.
And you can mention Ava, which has got promising as well projects. Can you describe a little bit what is the vision for Ava? Which is a category leader on a global basis in an emerging niche.
Yeah, well, women's health is an interesting space where since actually the launch of the pill in 50 years ago or 60 years ago even, not so much innovation has happened. And a lot of the medical studies were actually done with men because men are less complex in terms of hormonal changes. So there has not been a lot of innovation, and what we are trying to do with Ava is really understand these hormonal changes much better. And that does not only have impact on getting pregnant, but also hopefully preventing some of the side effects that the hormonal pill that has not been questioned and has had huge advantages. Obviously, I'm not questioning the positive impact of the pill, but there are some negative aspects up to, let's say, menopause, which is still very poorly understood. And if you talk to gynecologists, they say, you know, often we have patients coming in with sleep issues or headache or weight gain and hot flashes, and we're not really sure what to do because 20 years ago you just gave hormones, but there is
so what's
obviously
the future?
Side effects. So I do believe with new technologies and Ava can play a role here. There is incredible advances possible also in women's health.
So Pascal, if you combine all the technologies you've described, what could you see? How could you describe the future of women's health? You know, you take Ava, you take connected watches, you take genomics you were talking about. So in 5 years' time, how should women envision a better world with these technologies?
Yeah, I think it depends very much on the area, but if we stay with menopause, I do believe that understanding what's really happening are the issues related to hormone changes, or is it just that you have stress at work or with your family or other issues, I think is crucial then to define what therapy is needed, and not just define what therapy, but then also monitor whether the therapy actually works or not. So I do think that different things come together, but jointly they will have huge impact. And I would like to take another example, pregnancy. About 10% of women have issues during pregnancy.
Right.
It could be gestational diabetes or preeclampsia or an infection or other stuff, where I again am convinced that Ava can play a key role in identifying such issues early, and then jointly with other solutions prevent them from actually having a big impact, prevent hospital stays, and so on. And I think that jointly will have a big impact.
And do you think it will remain a separate device or a watch which you carry during the night? That's the current product of Ava. Or do you think there will be a universal smartwatch which will do all those functions for everybody, men and women, with a number of use cases? What do you think is the future?
I strongly think there will be both. I do think that there will be platforms like the Apple Watch you mentioned, like Fitbit, Samsung. In China, obviously, there are some of the biggest companies are actually not so well known here that are super successful in China. And I do think there will be apps running on them and using these platforms, so I think they will be important. But at the same time, I do believe there is also space for additional specific products on the hardware side. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't really care too much where the data is coming from. What is really making the difference is developing the algorithms and understand what to do with the big data sets.
And Switzerland should be very well positioned for that, to pioneer those data collection with different devices and then eventually leverage it on larger global platforms.
Absolutely.
That should be the
absolutely. And it's interesting, actually. I mean, we have a lot of discussion now, both in the US and also in China. And I do believe that Switzerland has a role to play there, because what I see is that Chinese companies have no way to be successful in the US in this current environment, and the same vice versa. So it's very difficult for US tech companies to be successful in China. Whereas I think Switzerland, which is considered high tech and I think positively associated probably many countries, including China and the US. And I think as a Swiss company, as a deep tech company, definitely you can be successful both in the US and in China, which is actually, if you look at it then from a bigger perspective, is a crucial point.
It's a unique selling point, absolutely. To talk on the weaknesses of Switzerland, we still have an issue on the exit side. So not enough buyers would purchase the companies, or especially on the IPO, so stock exchanges. Many Swiss companies prefer to go to the US because you get better coverage and better prices. So what should we do in that regard?
Yeah, it's absolutely frustrating sometimes to see that, because the money is here in Switzerland. Yes, and there are some of the finest financial institutions in the world here, with Credit Suisse and UBS and Partners Group and many great private banks. So there is actually the potential to keep innovation in Switzerland. And it's frustrating to see that actually a lot of companies go to NASDAQ, and if they stay in Europe, to other stock exchanges like NASDAQ First North, for instance, which have huge dynamics at the moment. So I do believe we need to really address this topic in Switzerland and make sure that we don't lose all these companies to other stock exchanges.
So something to fix. Anything else you would suggest the government should be stronger involved
Well, I think that's one of the nice things of Switzerland, that it's very small and still diverse, right? So I think it's very easy to talk to politicians, which are, based on my experience, actually quite open to health insurances, to regulators, Swissmedic in our case, and to big corporates,
Absolutely.
small corporates. So we have basically everything that is needed to do early stage development and piloting, and once we see it works and it has traction, then bring it to the world, to the US, to China, to the European Union. So I think there is a very good basic, and if we play that well, I think Switzerland has a big role to play.
So Pascal, we're done, but I hope it's only the beginning. We will do other interviews with entrepreneurs to build on your vision, and all together, I think as a country, we can certainly realize and implement many of those ideas for the greater future. Thank you very much.
In the Swisscom Ventures Deeptech Nation Forum, we talk to some of Switzerland's most influential people in the high-tech sector. Together, we are shaping Switzerland's future.